Hello everybody, we're just going to give a few people a few more seconds. We've had some messages with people having challenges accessing the webinar today. So we'll get started in about 20 or 30 seconds. If you could just bear with us, that would be great. Okay, I think we'll get started. It's just a little after 3 UK time. Big welcome to everybody. Huge thank you from us here at License Dashboard for taking the time out of your days to attend our short webinar, increase some awareness with your business with BI reporting. My name is David Chamberlain. I'm the General Manager here at License Dashboard. Brilliant to see once again the split of attendees on our webinars. It's very diverse geographically, as usual. Today is no exception. So again, your time here is very much appreciated. I know it's either early for our transatlantic friends or late if you are across the Eastern. We are an ITAM tools vendor, and we're a provider of ITAM consultancy services. For anybody on the call today that doesn't know us or not aware of us, we're headquartered just outside of historic York in the north of England. But today, obviously with remote working here in the UK, I'm streaming live, as it were, from a very tiny village just outside of the Victorian seaside resort of Scarborough on the beautiful North Yorkshire coast. It's a very nice sunny day. From a housekeeping perspective, we've placed everybody on mute. Just eliminates any background noise. Make sure that hopefully the messaging that we're trying to deliver today is going to be clear. But we do hope that you will raise any questions or queries along the way using the chat facility. My colleague, our marketing manager, Ben Eaglin, is going to be monitoring the chat facility. And I'll do my best. He'll let me know of anything that's relevant as we go along. And everything else that we don't cover off during that, we will have a Q&A session at the end. We always pencil in the slots for an hour, but we do try and wrap up within 30 or so minutes, just to keep everyone's attention. And of course, just should you have any questions, there's plenty of time at the end of that. And again, we always record these sessions, and Ben's going to send out a link for you to review at your leisure. And of course, any questions that come up afterwards, we will always have our support teams available via email or phone. So yeah, to discuss anything that's a query that you might find afterwards, or anything that might have piqued your interest. So what is it that you've signed up today? What can you expect to hear from us? Well, we're going to look at the reality of the situation as it stands today. Is the value of SAM fully understood within our businesses right now? And we're going to start off with some very broad ITAM research we did within our community. I believe it was just at the start of the year, Ben sent something out. We've got some really good information. Did throw out some very interesting gems amongst the answers you'd expect to hear. But it's interesting to see where internal engagement features amongst the plethora of challenges we all face as the person responsible for ITAM or SAM within our organizations. We'll cover off Agile as a methodology. It's very much a la mode right now. It's very current, rightly gaining plaudits in a variety of fields. And we're going to briefly explore how it could make some elements of what it is that we do more relevant and easy to consume for our stakeholders. And hopefully as a consequence, what we do more valued and more understood, which is of course one of our primary objectives. Finally, we're going to look at how we make all of those rows and columns of data that the nuts and bolts of this webinar. How we take those millions of cells of information, how we strip it back and present it to make it meaningful to our various stakeholders within the business. Things like removing superfluous noise, that it's not intimidating to them, but something that's actually intuitive and something that they would be keen to consume and have on a regular basis. We've done this a few times in the past, and it's quite fun. We do like to try and make the webinar interactive beyond the Q&A. Along the way, we are going to be asking some questions, and you're going to be able to share your experience and opinions electronically. Nothing too invasive, it's all anonymous. But hopefully we might gain some real world insights. So if you've got a smartphone or a tablet, we'll ask you to key in this URL at some point today. There'll be a little pop-up box at the relevant period, and you can key in that code into the box, and it'll just take you into a session where we collectively as a group can ask some questions and hopefully spin out some interesting answers. Okay, so before we get to that, on with the slides, the presentations, this recent ITAM survey, I guess it was one of the reasons why we decided to put on this webinar. One of the questions that we posed the community, we asked, what are the current major challenges for SAM managers? And our survey said, well, there's lots of challenges. I mean, it's quite close in number. As you'd expect, there's the usual suspects, headaches of data collection featuring very highly, top of the tree. Most of half respondents highlighting this as an issue, closely followed by understanding licensing rules. But despite the maturity of our industry, irrespective that software and hardware are crucial to the success and productivity of our businesses, let's face it, everyone knows and accepts we need the right and appropriate software on stable and reliable infrastructure. And despite the fact it also represents so much of our expenditure, and we've all heard the Gartner Forrester industry stats out there, all about the tangible savings as well as the scary experiences of anyone going through a vendor instigated audit. Yet despite all of that, we still have to promote and evangelize the value and worth of what it is that we do internally, and collectively we still struggle to do just that. If we look a little bit further down the chart, a few other items stand out too. Achieving those cost savings, for example, reporting and sharing SAM data, and the clarity of my SAM data. Perhaps they're all contributing factors. Maybe they're all parts of the same problem. And if we could fix or at least improve some of those aspects, maybe the challenge of promoting SAM internally might naturally resolve itself. The results clearly demonstrating business value back and speaking for themselves, being the theory. So the information that we hold, data, is essentially what it is, and we've all heard the term data is new gold or the new oil. Well, this data has so much potential value to so many areas of our businesses, but only if we're able to harness it and apply intelligence and context to it so that it can be used bespokely by a broad spectrum of stakeholders. There are some really good examples here on the slide of what can happen if that isn't the case. But I'd just like to talk through a couple of scenarios I've witnessed firsthand. Real world example, company A, decent sized, mid-sized multinational organization, spending somewhere in the region of about 15 million euros per year just on software. They've got a vastly experienced SAM team, their own in-house ITAM experts. I mean, these guys are more than a match for consultants from LSPs and SAM consultancies, but they also have the added advantage of being long-term employees with 5+ years of intimate knowledge of their organization. But their real struggle is engaging their remote localized IT teams despite years of their own central IT successes. Local IT get the logic of the concept of the group ITAM function to a degree, but because they can't visualize that journey in relatable, manageable chunks, they can only see a huge SAM elephant. They choose autonomy and their own path just because they don't have the appetite to take that on. The main reason behind this is that they don't feel that their diluted local resource, people who have so many other tasks, responsibilities, and roles, have the capacity to cope with something that they suspect will consume so much of their precious time. Another good example, Company B, we'll call them, a few years back, even larger customer, they had individual stakeholders responsible for single software vendor contracts. So they tried to reach out with any of those stakeholders that they knew were negotiating a renewal of that contract. They reached out with offers of spreadsheets of product footprint, application metering statistics, device counts, anything that they could in order to help what they thought would validate a new agreement and assess appropriate need. But to those stakeholders, success was often thought to be the haggling of the contract, the brinkmanship, price reduction, concessions, signing groundbreaking all-you-can-eat enterprise agreements without any real consideration to real business demand for that actual software, or even considering whether things like alternatives were out there, alternative solutions that might be free or less expensive or easier to deploy. Yes, often it was probably the right thing to do in terms of the outcome, and sometimes that outcome was a success. But without the certainty from our analysis and due diligence that we can give, that success was purely by luck and accidental, and not something they'd have done as a typical business practice elsewhere. So depending upon the size of your organization, you may have more or less users than those that are displayed in this slide. And in all likelihood, some of those users in your organization may well have 2 or more of these responsibilities, but the principles are going to be the same. They all have very different requirements of data or service. Certainly things that they need to be obtaining from us in order to fulfill their roles effectively. And of course, not getting that data from us leads to challenges, inefficiencies, risks, all of those missed opportunities that we saw on the previous slide. But if we can understand the individual requirements of each of those users in terms of data or service, and we're able to remove the unnecessary noise that normally surrounds the information that they don't need, then we can break down that SAM elephant into smaller, manageable chunks, more suited to your users' appetites. The end user experience is generally going to be far better. As a consequence, they're going to be more likely to re-engage in the future with a repeat of the service, or certainly be willing to explore and consider some of your other services. And of course, each time they do that, we'd hope that they'd gain some additional business value from us.
Should we just knock that slide on one there? Good stuff. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize there's an animation within that. Okay, so let's go to Menti. And I can see already that people are starting to fill that in. I guess it's nice for us to be able to share who we think the departments we should be sharing and data with, and certainly working more closely with. The bigger the text, I believe, Ben, the more frequent the input from the audience. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So deployment, purchasing, architects. Yeah, it's great to see that people appreciate the value of what it is that we've got, and the value that it would offer these other teams: internal audit, local IT, contract vendor management, infrastructure.
Something we see, Dave, when we speak to different clients in various parts of the world is it's nearly always different, the departments that are, the SAM teams are trying to work with in these clients. There isn't really a sort of universal structure, is there? It really depends on the company.
CIO.
You can see the two that are quite prominent there in finance and procurement, Dave. But I think they probably ring true for a lot of people, but it's the ones around the edge are sometimes ones that are important and can get overlooked.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think one of the big considerations that we have to have as the ITAM or SAM function is how do we make the information that we have friendly enough and not scary and not intimidating to these kinds of users. We'll just leave that running for another 20 seconds or so. But it's great. Thank you for everybody's input. It seems that we're all very much on the same page as to who requires our data and who we need to make sure that we can interact with moving forward.
I see platform owners is there, Dave, which is an interesting one. As obviously the SAM team can only do so much sometimes in terms of the changes that they make, but it's those kind of people that they need to work with in order to actually make some of the changes, carry out the recommendations the SAM team is uncovering through the data.
Yeah, it's a two-way relationship, isn't it? So it's good to foster that kind of ongoing communication with these teams, and it certainly makes things that you need them to do easier to get from them.
Security is maybe showing up a little larger than I suspected as well. It's often a good one for data sources. I know we've spoken about that before, Dave.
Yeah, so that they need to know what assets you've got and where you've got them. I think this patch management and the typical products that are out there that are essential to keep on top of. But I think from a security perspective, you want to know what kinds of software are out there and also whether they're in support. So that's a crucial thing for us to understand, particularly in health, etc., where we had some virus attacks because of old unsupported software being out there. Yeah, we can feed so much value and so much information to so many different types of stakeholders.
Great. Well, thank you for everybody who participated in that. It doesn't work so well if it's just me and you, Dave, that bit, does it?
Yeah, I couldn't hear you typing loads of things in there, so I think we must have had a few people involved and engaged. That's great, thank you. Okay, so moving on. As internal programs mature over time, as they shift from, let's say, reactive function to something more dynamic, one of the real KPIs or measures of success is proactive engagement with those stakeholders. That's to say, it's stakeholder initiated. They come to you for that information, for that data, or for a specific service. Now, they're only going to do that if your data or service fits their need, and either from experience or anecdotal feedback from their peers is going to offer them relevant value without being overwhelming or attritional. Now, I don't want to sound personal with that attritional. We are all ITAMS professionals, after all, and we are thorough. We're known for being that, and we're known for our attention to detail, but it's not necessarily everybody's cup of tea. It's amazing how quickly your service will plummet to the bottom of someone's to-do list if they suspect the work required on their side is going to be arduous and time-consuming, especially when the reward potential is not easily quantifiable or tangible. So again, avoid trying to serve up this SAM elephant, as it were. Much can be done by breaking everything down into smaller, manageable pieces that on their own will offer demonstrable value. And with them being smaller, it's easier to quantify that value. PR, sorry, I moved on again too quickly. PR is also hugely important. One of our more established customers got a very mature ITAM function, recognise that with each and every service initiated, there's some form of demonstrable business value realised. It might be optimization opportunity, risk mitigation, strategy validation, whatever it might be. They now dedicate significant effort to effectively market their services. It's something that our LD marketing department are working with them on. But they spend significant time and energy planning and delivering an ongoing internal campaign to stakeholders. It's newsletters, it's emails, it's case studies, it's education. It's an ongoing process. They see the value in that, and they see the value in that PR and raising the profile in that way to their end stakeholders. And the PR will only take you so far. The presentation layer is the hook that's going to keep them. As a group, as I said before, we're known for our love of spreadsheets, pivot tables. We have spent many years working with unwieldy Excel documents, really clever stuff that we've done ourselves, millions of cells of data, as I said before, VLOOKUPs. Our stakeholders hate them. That's the fact. They're not accessible as a convenient, handy commodity, and they're not really intelligible to the uninitiated. They're really documents that satisfy our need and our desires and egos as ITAM professionals. To the end stakeholder, they're difficult to interpret, and the story that we're trying to tell and the intended message is not always easy to follow. Agile, big talking point in today's business vernacular. In many disciplines and many industries, it's a very hot topic. It does originate from iterative software development. It's a kind of project management process logic kind of framework. If we're to put it into simplified terms, we all accept we've got a finite amount of time as individuals or as a collective group within a team. That's to say the days or weeks in a month where we can feasibly perform our tasks. So if we know what work we need to achieve or deliver, then by breaking that workload down into smaller chunks or tasks, we can create a list of actions, which is also known as a backlog. The clever bit is creating a logical order in which to tackle this backlog. So naturally, there is sometimes an interreliance between backlog items that's going to drive some of the chronology. But what we're really looking to do is create a priority to these tasks based upon their business value and, of course, in relation with one another. And if we have that as our aspiration, we should always be using the time that we've got wisely and, of course, producing maximum business benefit. We have adopted this at License Dashboard. It's quite a scary thing to look at and to start the journey with, but it is actually quite liberating to literally park items you must take a back seat in order to focus on the value and the backlog that you need to deliver those priority items. Of course, the backlog does still need to be reviewed regularly because of the fluid nature of prioritization. Some event might come in, an audit request or a renewal date that will change the priority of your backlog. But once we've got effort attributed to each task, we've got the ability to select which of the important actions we want to achieve and look to complete them within a set time frame, a short set time frame, also known as a sprint. But as the name suggests, the agile name that is, we do need to be prepared for that change of priority. And of course, what you're able to do is switch out certain tasks for those priority items that need to be done within that sprint if necessary. Applying this to software asset management is logical. Instead of us trying to boil the ocean, we're looking to break it down into smaller chunks and determine the best order in which to tackle them. So who are our priority vendors? Which pose the biggest risk? Within these vendors, are there subsets of products we should focus on? Are there some that are safe to ignore? Is our footprint so static for certain products that it's a waste of effort to actually look at those on a regular basis. As soon as these services are broken down into chunks and you've scientifically prioritized what services you should be delivering to the business and why, you've got a very compelling argument to take to your stakeholders. So software asset management as a function in its own right has really evolved. We are enablers for all sorts of initiatives like digital transformation. We can provide so much more intelligence and insights nowadays. Deployed products reaching end of life, we touched on for the security guys, asset warranty information, asset age, categories of software deployed for rationalization initiatives. But making your stakeholders aware of the additional value of the data readily available to them will certainly raise the profile of the ITAM function. And their interactions with you will naturally increase, and that's what we're looking for really. We're looking for frequent, constant dialogue between us and the business. There are still connotations from the past 5-10 years ago that do sort of still stick and prevail. Some of the negatives associated with software asset management still persist. Terms like audit, shortfall, ELP, baseline, compliance. They don't do us any favors really. To a degree, many of our functions are still tarred with this, and it's a hurdle that we've really got to overcome in order to better reach out to the stakeholders and provide them with data or services that can really impact them in a positive way. And that's only going to be done through proactive PR. This might be case studies of recent successes that you've had, highlighting wins. They're the things that are really going to change that perception. In the first instance, if you're new to this journey, then don't necessarily need to be yours. You can share data from other people within the community, particularly where there's some synergy with your own businesses. We just got to get these stories in front of our stakeholders and of course, potential consumers of our service. And that takes us on to BI reporting. I know I'm repeating myself, but ITAM data is millions of cells of noise to our stakeholders. Really, we need to tune them into only the parts that are going to be relevant to them. It might be a collection of data for a specific department or business unit or cost center. Maybe they are a contract vendor manager and they only have responsibility for certain products or certain vendors. We need to filter out that unnecessary noise, help them focus on the essentials through our presentation layer and the exact subset of the data they need, and only that. Once we've got that clarity, the data itself should be presented in a visual that illustrates the story that you're really trying to convey. Done correctly, the visual should get across this message in a fraction of the time of an Excel report or a pivot table. It has to be less intimidating than that pivot table. It's got to draw the stakeholder in so that they're going to interact with that data and use it to influence their decision-making process. Some numbers you're trying to present, let's face it, they might not make pleasant reading. We might have some big alarm bells ringing. It might be a snapshot of, say, a financial exposure. Then the context of that exposure is going to be hugely important. Is it a new exposure? Is it an improving situation? Is it a worsening position? Has a single event recently happened that's triggered that? How do we compare with our historic performance? So we might be, let's throw out a million pounds financial exposure, but if we were 2 million last month, it's an improving position. And if on average we're 1.5 million in terms of exposure, then we can sort of gauge our performance and how we've been across the time. Yes, it's not great, but we certainly know which direction it's going. Okay, so we're going to go to another slide, another Menti. If you could do that for us. How do we move that on, Ben?
So you should just be able to click next question on your screen there, Dave.
I can't see that anywhere.
If you put Menti on your screen, share that, then we'll be able to see that.
There we go. And then
there we go.
Great. Yeah. So if you could, have a bit of a think about your current situations, how things are with your current stakeholders, and if you're able to sort of give us some generic feedback on your current stakeholder engagement.
Could you just share Menti on your screen, Dave? We just got the slide deck at the moment still. Thank you.
There we go. So ordinarily, Ben and I would be in the same room and he'd be helping me out with these technicalities, but hopefully everyone can see those things now. So broadly, it's developing. It's nice to see that's good. And I'd be interested to know if it was good for all stakeholder engagement, or whether it was just for those things that you seem suitable to be key, only when necessary, non-existent. We'll just leave that running for a couple of minutes.
It's not a bad place to be, actually, David, and it's possibly better than I expected. I'm not sure what you think, but having the bulk of people in between developing and good means that there's plenty of companies who feel that they could be moving towards excellent, maybe hopefully applying some of the things that we're discussing today.
Yeah, that's good. And I guess people have come on this call because they want to take it further and look at additional ways that they could improve that engagement, which is obviously desirable from our point of view. Okay, well that's super. Thank you very much for playing along. It is great to feel some human interaction on these calls, and our Ben feels the same as I do. We're about to move on to a demonstration of how we currently do that within License Dashboard and the types of visuals that we make available to our end user community. We've got a family of products. License Manager is the product that we as SAM consultants would use and deliver our work. It helps us understand what's deployed versus what entitlement that we have. But we designed a presentation layer called License Dashboard Portal that's fully designed to make that publication of the data as accessible and as easy to access for other ITAM stakeholders within our customers' businesses. So it's available via a web URL. You key in a username, password, it knows exactly who you are. The system allows you to set up personas. So it will publish data to certain users. So a CIO, a purchaser, an IT asset manager. It's just going to target tiles that are relevant to those roles. It also strips out information that we want to keep as secure. So some of the sensitive information like contractual terms, how much we spend with a vendor, we might not want that in the general community. It might not be necessary. So of course we can prevent certain users from seeing certain sensitive information. We might want to keep exposure hidden from certain users as well, because it is a risk to our brand. But the purpose of License Dashboard Portal is when you log on, it gives you the tiles that are relevant to your persona. And of course, we can restrict it down to a vendor and of course, any particular business unit information. The whole point of the product is, and you can see that I've got quite a few tiles and things set up for me. Obviously for demonstration purposes, I want to be able to show the full range. But if you imagine, we can target users with important information and they're not going to get overwhelmed with too much data as a consequence of that. One of the things that I'd really like to share is the power of compliance and financial exposure, and how BI can really make that information accessible to a whole variety of users. So we have a financial exposure tile, and if I was to share this with my boss, it tells a very good story. It tells the full context of that fantastic figure of 25 million financial exposure. In one particular tile and chart, they know geographically where we've got an issue. They know which vendors represent the biggest issue, and then within each vendor, those products that are the highest risk. And of course, even within each operating company and environmental issues. We also know across time whether it's a new or an emerging issue, and we keep some KPIs up at the top. So currently we're 25 million short. Typically we run at 35 million. So actually we're not doing too bad. We're 71% of the average in terms of how we ordinarily perform. But the power that's intended to draw in somebody like a CIO or the managing director of a business is their ability to actually understand what it is we're trying to tell them from this particular story. So they know straight away that we've got an issue in the Africa region. So they can click into that interaction and actually see what that exposure is. So of that 25 million, 16 million of it resides within Africa. And that is performing worse than it normally does. We know that Microsoft is the biggest risk. So of 25 million, 12 million is in Africa, and it's Microsoft. And we know that it's in the virtual server area of the system, and we know that it's Windows Server, for example. And we know that it's a very, very recent introduction into our estate. So as a CIO, as a SAM manager, I'm empowered straight away with that information that something's happened in my virtual environment to make me suddenly non-compliant when everything was running smoothly as before. So it might be that I've switched on some DRA rules. It might be that I've introduced a brand new version of Windows Server into the data center. But straight away, in a few clicks, I've got to the crux of the problem and I know how I can go about potentially fixing that. So that's the power of the story that's being told through these interactive charts. And once you've engaged your stakeholders in actively using this information for their roles, for their functions, you can start to introduce them into other fields. So for example, we have the self-service element. Some of your stakeholders might want different flavors of the tiles or of the charts that they've got, or they might want to create their own BI information. And we have a full library in this back end that will enable them to do that as not necessarily experts, but as users of data analytics. So if we wanted to take this financial exposure chart that we saw before, they can create their own or they can edit any of these charts. It might be that they're not interested in any of these bits of information across the top. So we'll just delete that out. It might be that they want to put in an additional chart, so an additional layer of information. So they're going to just choose a tree map and just drag it to whatever size that they want. And we're just going to add some filters or some expressions that we've got already created, and there's a full library for these. I think I've gone past it. Product category. I'll just get rid of these ones as well. I'm not bothered about those. So straight away, we've done some additional information to that chart. We've put in yet another dimension of power to that data. So we can see here what categories of software are currently a significant financial exposure. So if I was bothered, let's say, about computer-aided design or CAD software, I can filter on that. I can see which vendors we have, which represent CAD software, which businesses are actively using them, and which products. are actually showing as non-compliant for them. And we can do that with all measures for software licenses, software license renewals, metering, products that are deployed, compliant products, non-compliant products. There's all manner of data analysis that we can perform and offer additional value to our end user community. And that's effectively what we wanted to cover off today. I can see that we've just hit the promised 40-minute mark. I guess what we'd really like to do is open the floor to any questions. Ben, has anything cropped up during the course of the webinar?
We've just had the one come in so far during the demonstration, and that was just to confirm, is License Dashboard Portal reliant on having License Manager installed in the first place, which you explained about at the start?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely, it is. It points to the License Manager database and does strip out the information. We've started to work with some of our other customers to get other data sources in there as well, just so that it's all in the single pane of glass for their ITAM stakeholders. But yeah, it's fully customizable. It's just BI pointing at some form of database or some form of CSV or Excel file.
So hypothetically, people viewing today's webinar, if they're not a License Manager user currently, they could maybe be thinking about something like Power BI, or become a click user themselves to build their own kind of charts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you see the data that's there, it's reporting on products from a dictionary. Those dictionary items will have categorization, it will have RRPs, it'll have multiple pricing schemes. We've got flavors of country of use, business unit, department. So obviously, if you're able to cut up your estates and tag everything appropriately, have a field for each of those values, then of course you're going to get some real power out of the BI. Obviously, with Portal, it's driven from our dictionaries and our intel.
There's no further questions from the viewers yet, Dave, but I thought it might be interesting just to talk about how some of our customers are rolling out License Dashboard Portal across their user base and the things that they need to think about. I'm thinking in terms of training and how they've gone about that to their stakeholders.
Yeah, so for one of our larger customers who has a License Dashboard Portal, they're somewhere in the region of about 150,000 end users. They've got the potential of 200 to 300 stakeholders for usage of this data. And of course, what we've seen on the demonstration today is just the tip of the iceberg. So typically, what we try and do is establish the broad functions that are available within the product through a series of trainings. We do have our online License Dashboard Academy that helps people see currently what is possible. But what we try not to do is think people are going to be limited by the data that's currently in there. And we've had some very interesting experiences with that particular customer who had a remote area of their business that wanted to age or understand what aged hardware they had out there that had reached 4 years old or not. They currently didn't have a system to do that. We made some tweaks within our back end, and they now have that data accessible to them without any additional charge or a new product out there or a new service. It's just constantly served to them so that they can make sure that they don't have certain assets that are over 4 years old out in their estates.
And probably worth mentioning a couple of the tools outside of License Manager that Portal does feed into as well. I'm thinking Office 365, Azure.
Yeah, of course. It's that single pane of glass. If people want Office 365 information, typically they would have to go onto their Azure portal or look at it through another SAM tool, a SaaS interface that helps them understand subscription usage, subscription assignment. Of course, yes, we've got interfaces with the Microsoft Graph API, so billing information from products like Azure will come in ordinarily and as part of the course.
Great. There's no further questions from anybody on the webinar today, Dave. So I think we'll leave that there. The contact details are on screen if anybody does want further information, but thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you everybody. Thanks for everyone who's stuck with it. I hope you can enjoy the rest of your days.
There is one question, Dave, and it's a nice question. How to get a demo of the Licensed Dashboard Portal product? I think make contact with us through the information on screen would be the short answer to that one.
Yeah, you can actually get a demonstration of Licensed Dashboard Portal using your own data as well. It's very, very easy for us to do. It's just a couple of hours of extracting certain files, and you'll be able to see what your data looks like within the system and how accessible your data would be to your end stakeholders. It's very easy for us to set up a proof of concept.
Great. So just drop us an email to the address you see on screen, or go to the website and fill in the contact form there, and we'll get back to you promptly to make arrangements for that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, David. Thanks everybody for joining, as Dave said.
Thank you very much.